Merci beaucoup, Monsieur David Ekwe-Dossé. Des termes, je pense, qui poussent à la réflexion, sans doute. L'audace de la réforme, il nous dit. Nous aurons certainement l'occasion d'y revenir au cours de ces panels de haute facture. Merci pour cette parole droite, forte, comme un cri lucide pour nos démocraties. Alors, sans plus tarder, la personne que nous nous apprêtons à appeler, il est sociologue, intellectuel panafricain, directeur de l'un des plus grands fonds philanthropiques africains, Ebrima Sall. C'est une voix rare et respectée du continent. Cette organisation, son organisation Trust Africa, œuvre pour le renforcement des institutions, la justice économique et la souveraineté du savoir en Afrique. Son engagement pour une Afrique qui pense par elle-même est connu et reconnu. Sous vos applaudissements, Monsieur Ebrima Sall.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. I have a small voice problem, so please to everyone to bear with me. But Excellencies, Prime Ministers, Madam Toure, Mr. Loom, all the Prime Ministers in the room, Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, writers, Sal and everyone else here, on all protocols observed. It is with immense pleasure that we, as Trust Africa, accepted to partner with our brothers, Professor Alioune Tine and his organization African Jom to celebrate the 50th anniversary of ECOWAS. So happy 50th anniversary to ECOWAS, and happy 50th anniversary to all of us here. And we are talking about a celebration, okay? Because there are a lot of things to celebrate in the history of ECOWAS. I think my predecessor has mentioned some of the achievements and some of the areas in which ECOWAS did very well. You remember the context in which ECOWAS was created. Independence in West Africa alone, we're talking about roughly 16 states. In the whole of the continent, it's about 50, more than 50 states. Fragmentation, political, sociological, linguistic, policy, every sense. So there was no way one could seriously think about development or even peace with such levels of fragmentation. So it made sense to come together and say we want to transcend the boundaries. We want to reconnect with our histories. We want to reconnect with the dreams of those who were the founders of the independence movements, the liberation struggles of this continent, and come together. And at our level in Trust Africa, and form a community, not only of states, but of peoples and communities. So it was a beautiful idea, a beautiful project, and it was handled with imagination and creativity and ingenuity. The founders were well inspired in the way they went about setting up the ECOWAS community, and they were methodic about it. They were very creative. The institutions that were established, were excellent. A lot of conventions of high quality protocols were adopted, covering a number of areas. There were good projects having to do with infrastructure. More recently, talking about currency, single currency for the region. So it all went very well. And I come from the Gambia, and I can tell you, we appreciated the intervention of ECOWAS when we were dealing with a post-electoral crisis after 22 years of dictatorship. And the person who was voted out, who was brutalizing people for all these years, refused to move. There are in this room people who were in that struggle, Fatou Jain Senghor, Salutal, and a number of other colleagues were here, of course with the solidarity of Rado, Aliuntin, and all his colleagues here. So we know what it meant to have a force like ECOWAS in the region to step in and say, look, the people have made their decisions, and the decisions have to be respected. And that was excellent. So we have things to celebrate. I think it is not because we are in a crisis that we should forget the road traveled, that there have been achievements as well. That would be beating ourselves to a hurt, I believe. So institutions like ECOMOG were unique, no comparisons, no parallels anywhere. It was an invention of the region. That it was called different names in different places. ECOMCIL in Sierra Leone, I believe. ECOMIG in Gambia, it had other names elsewhere. And it intervened in crisis, dealt with security issues. And that was a time when, because of the civil wars going on in the region, the integration project was seriously challenged. And again, it made sense for the institution, for ECOWAS, for the community to adapt and face the context and the challenges of the moment. Then, of course, the situation became much more complex, much more complicated. We shouldn't forget that the over-determining conditions are those of the climate crisis hitting everybody. We are talking about many countries being Sahelian in our region, having to do with droughts and different kinds of challenges. We had, violent conflicts proliferating in the region, armed groups, jihadist movements of all kinds coming around. And there are a lot of other challenges that the region was confronted with. And of course, we had the more recent crisis where, following a certain number of transitions in these countries, a number of them came together and decided to break away. Now, this is a serious and it's probably the single most important challenge that the institution is faced with now. So the question is, what do we do as we celebrate the 50th anniversary? It's a moment to reflect. It's an opportunity to rethink. I think the point has been made. It's an opportunity to rethink. I don't think the idea is to try at all costs to make the institutions work as we had imagined them before. I think it has been proven that the institutions need to be rethought completely and reinvented. And that rethinking, of course, has to be guided by what we are seeing happening around us. The world has changed. As we are talking, there is a war going on in one part of the world, and we are feeling the impact. If we haven't felt it yet, we will feel it. We've already felt the increase in oil prices is one impact of what is going on in the Middle East today. Before then, you had the war in Gaza. There are so many other challenges going on. Changes in regime, including in North America, impacting on how our economies are financed, how development is going on in our region. So we have reasons already, even without the crisis involved in the AES, to rethink our institutions and our integration project. In our own context, some positive developments that have occurred include the ACFTA, the free trade zone that Africa has signed up to and is building, which obviously will have an impact on the mandate of ECOWAS and what ECOWAS is able to do. It's an opportunity, but it creates also a new situation. So the need to rethink and the institution and the community is there already. And I think that is what should guide us. Secondly, beyond the current crisis, where do we want to go? Where do we see our communities and our societies 50 years down the line? What will the next 50 years be like? What do we want West Africa to be like in the next 50 years? What do we want to contribute to the transformation of our continent over the next 50 years or so? And I think we have to handle these two issues together. Responding to the emergencies that are on the agenda today. But we cannot spend all our time firefighting. We also have to respond to the crisis by keeping our eyes firmly fixed on where we want to go over the long haul, the goals, long-term goals we want to achieve. So it's a question of reinventing the ECOWAS project, so to say, and imagining a new society and a new world in which you want to be. In a sense, we have to reinvent the future. And this is where I think a couple of issues will become very important over the next few years. Some of them have been mentioned already, but I think 4 issues are very important going forward. First are the security issues. They remain paramount. Not only military security, you have armed groups, armed bases have been, military bases have been mentioned, but beyond military bases, those are probably the easiest ones to deal with because you know where they are, you know where they come from, you don't want them, you ask them to leave, and that's happening already. The more serious ones are actually the armed groups that are proliferating, and the number of arms circulating in our region has actually been historic. West Africa is one of the places where the number of small arms circulating is the largest proportionally. So we have security issues to deal with. We also have human security issues to deal with. Issues of livelihoods, jobs, food security, climate security, social security. So these are issues that are very, very important, and I think they have to be on top of the agenda. Secondly, problems of democracy and governance. Mr. Dose has referred to some of these issues, Dr. Dose. Of course, term limits are important, but the whole issue of democratic governance is actually much broader than the issue of term limits. We have a situation in which our demographic majorities are political minorities. Our populations are made of mainly young people. You look at the median age in our societies, right? The young people and the women are the majority, and that is not going to change anytime soon. In fact, in the next 15 to 20 years, Africa will have the concentration, the largest concentration of young people in any continent. Okay? And many of these people have actually no say in how their governments, their societies are run. So the thing to correct is actually to really democratize governance and center the women and youth and all the people who really are the ones who are making changes, who are making things happen. So the issue of democratic governance, I think, will become very, very important. In its complexity, we have to think about it and take it and center it in the ECOWAS project. The third issue, of course, is that of economic transformation and development. We definitely have to, to get out of the sort of the colonial production mode in which many of our economies are still. The impact of the way in which the economies were structured out of colonialism is still being felt today. So we are still tied to the global economies in ways that do not do service or do justice to our own societies. So we have to renegotiate our mode of insertion in the global economy. We have to have a much better control of our economies and of our development processes. And of course, it has to be done with transformation. We cannot only be exporting raw materials, whether they are precious minerals or materials of other kinds. Transformation is what is the key to the creation of jobs and responding to some of the pressing needs of the young people. The final thing, I think, is education and research. The point was made by the clubs, the ECOWAS clubs. It is central. When everything is changing, we are talking about AI. In our context, we actually have literally 4 industrial revolutions going on at the same time. People are still dealing with access to electricity, which is basic, something that was connected to the second industrial revolution. And yet, you also have the digital revolution. We're talking about AI, artificial intelligence today. And it's all happening, and it's here now. People are using drones to respond to challenges related to poverty and access to medication and food. So we have all those revolutions to deal with. And the key to that is education and research. And unfortunately, in our context, the institutions of education and research are among the most poorly serviced. They are under-resourced. The teachers are not benefited from any kind of social prestige, which is unfortunate. A contrast is a country like South Korea, where to be a teacher, you actually have to have been among the best in the school, who they encourage to stay and become teachers, and they are well treated, they are well paid. So education and research is absolutely fundamental if you want to move forward. So again, I just want to congratulate all of us, congratulate ECOWAS, and it's not because we have challenges that we should regret. It was a beautiful project, and it is still a relevant project, the project of integration at the level of ECOWAS and at the continental level. Because it's about unity, it's about being at the center of the changes that we want to happen. From the sense-making level, making sense of the realities, looking at the world with our own eyes, as Cabral would say, to the actual process of making the changes happen and financing our own institutions. I'll end on note. ECOWAS was actually good in that sense as well. For a time, it was good at generating the resources it needed, much of the resources it needed to function. And I think that was a good thing to do. So we need to get the resources we need for our own development, primarily from within our own economies and our own context as well. And of course, we can use development cooperation resources and other kinds of resources in a much more strategic way. I thank you for your attention, and I again apologize for the quality of my voice.